If property management is less happiness and more headache to you as an investor, there is a solution. Now, you may want to consider an alternative type of lease when managing tenants, and that is the triple net lease. If you find your tenants are looking for more flexibility in altering their property and you hate the hassle of property upkeep, then you'll want to learn more about this leasing technique. Okay, so let's talk about a triple net lease. So what that is that you are leasing a space. Now, a lot of times, let me just be clear, the majority of times this interaction of leasing takes place in retail or office structures and whole building leases. Okay, so that's kind of the predominance in the real estate investment world. But so let's say, for example, we're releasing in a retail plaza where triple net means that we're leasing to them at a certain dollar rate, but then the net expenses of the property, taxes, and insurance also flow to them that they are responsible for. So that differs from a just traditional property management or lease where, you know, the property's being leased to them at X dollars per square footage or for their space, and then the owner is responsible for the ongoing operation expenses, taxes, and insurance. So that's really the difference. You're transferring those net expenses over to the tenant, and it's called triple net because you're covering all those categories that I just said, your operating expenses, taxes, and insurance. So let's talk about the three components that we said of the triple net lease. We've got, as we said, operating expenses, taxes, and insurance. So when you have a triple net lease, all three of those are going over net to the tenant. So again, your operating expenses. Now, let's look at it from both sides. So from an investor and owner's perspective, I can now take all of my operating expenses and push those over pro rata to the tenant. Like, so if I've got 3 tenants in the building, each one of them gets a third of the operating expenses. Now, that makes life maybe potentially better for me, but also on the flip side of that coin for the tenant, there's a concern maybe about, are they really doing the most and very best to minimize expenses? So like if those expenses stayed on my side, I'm definitely vigilant to want to reduce expenses. Whereas if they're triple net to the tenant, maybe some owner, investor operators are not as vigilant. So that's definitely a concern there. Insurance, you know, that's one of the components that, again, as my insurance cost goes up, that gets pushed over net to the tenant. It's good from an investor owner standpoint of view because, again, none of us, the tenant nor the owner, has control over insurance market. You know, we've seen that here this past year in 2023 where insurance rates have been up because of all the different impacts that have happened with, you know, hurricane in Florida, freeze in Texas, California wildfires, fire in Hawaii. I mean, all these things have affected insurance companies and they've raised rates. So that triple net, you know, that cost gets pushed over pro rata to the tenant. And then taxes, again, taxes is another one of these areas that's outside of our component of ownership of control. And what I mean by that is we're really at the mercy of the politicians that are setting the tax rate within the municipality that the building's located at. So again, as an owner, it's good to have that built in where that's going over the tenant. And then each year that goes up, that cost gets pushed over to them. Now, in the reality of the execution of the triple net lease, a lot of times you're getting less increase in your overall rent as an owner because those variable expenses are being pushed over to the tenant. So, you know, in theory or in practice, how that means is you have a more stable income growth because here's my fixed rate going in now. This is going to yield such a return. And then those variable costs are pushing over to the tenant. So my typical rent growth with them is at a more moderated basis. So again, that is really the different components. And it depends on what side of the coin you're on. And it depends on what type of property it is as to whether it's going to be favorable or disfavorable. Let's talk about also some of the different components too. You have a single net lease, a double net lease, and the triple net lease. The triple net, we've already discussed that it's, you know, all three components. A double net lease is then 2 of those components, taxes and insurance, or oftentimes a single net lease is the operating expenses that are pushed over. Now, that being said, everything's subject to negotiation with that. And so a tenant could negotiate for one or both of those, a single net or double net. That is a reality that can take place. But more oftentimes in the commercial spaces, it's pretty much set, hey, this is what's available. And it's also dictated by what's going on in the marketplace. If everybody else is leasing at $18 a square foot and it's all in, meaning everything's included, and you're trying to lease at $18 a square foot triple net, they're not going to get takers on it, right? Because you're at a significant disadvantage compared to the other people in the market. So it's key to understand also what will your market bear. Let's talk about pros and cons for the triple net lease. Let's again highlight the differences between maybe the landlord and the tenant. So on the pro side for a landlord, you have all of your expense growth is built in and transferred over to the tenant. So that's great in that respect. The con for that is that you are also usually locking in what would be a lower growth rent increase. So again, it may, and I'm not saying guarantee, but may also reduce your, returns over a hold period of say 5 to 10 years because of the way that you're having to negotiate with the tenant. Now, from the tenant side, they look at it as a pro that they're getting able to lock in their lease rates, have lower increase incrementals coming up, and they have more benefit, if you will, that it is going to be based on the merit of the property's performance in terms of what their increased costs are going to be. So, in summary on the triple net lease, I think that it is definitely a valid approach to investing. It probably, from my experience of what I've seen, it has more applicability in use in the retail space. That's tend to be where I've seen that more applied. And I think with anything, look, you can't be married to just one approach or one strategy. You've got to be somewhat what I would call opportunistic. And as you're looking for low risk, good quality, high return investment opportunities, you've got to be willing to consider different options. And so for the single use building type space or for, large retail plaza, the triple net has a great opportunity, and definitely depending on the metrics and the numbers, we would be a taker on it. I'm here to keep you informed so that you can make the best decisions when it comes to investing your hard-earned money, and I've created a free guide to help you on your real estate journey. Click the link below to check it out. That's all I have for you folks. If you've learned something today, make sure to like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel for more content on real estate investing, and we'll see you in the next video.